Constable.
Face off.
Really? Hi. You didn't hear us knocking?
I do believe in the American dream.
The Dow made it another record close.
Owning a home is a part of that dream.
Las Vegas's growth spurt shows no signs of letting up.
You're not going to see the collapse
Time to go. It's eviction.
that you see when people talk about a bubble.
Home resales plunged 6.6%.
The economy is clearly slowing. Bear Stearns is not in trouble.
Given that the place is fully furnished.
That's just being silly.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5%, down over 16%,
18%.
21%.
43%.
Hello, constable's office. Anybody home?
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis.
That's some nice stuff.
People out here don't have a lot of time or a lot of patience. That's no excuse for inaction.
Get the money out of politics, and until a president says that's the problem and says he's going to fix it, there is no policy that I can possibly see, no matter how brilliant your idea may be, or your idea, or my idea, or her idea, or your idea at home.
How do you tell a story like this, one that is so complicated and with tentacles that reach into every aspect of our lives?
We've covered the effects from the beginning, the wave of foreclosures, bankruptcies, and joblessness, but it's a forest through the trees situation. Telling it piece by piece simply doesn't get to the heart of the story.
How did it happen? Who's responsible? Can we fix the damage and prevent it from happening again? Those are the big questions, the ones we try to focus on in this program.
Much of it told through the voices of individuals who would otherwise go unheard, the individuals and families who've been victimized, and the officials who struggled to help them hang on. We call it Desert Underwater.
Stumble down the boulevard of neon-encrusted temple.
The Las Vegas nickname Lost Wages, at least to most locals, used to apply exclusively to the 4.2 miles of Clark County known worldwide simply as the Strip.
Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas.
But these days, the parody, if you want to call it that, extends far beyond Las Vegas Boulevard to the neighborhoods of southern Nevada. Fortunes here wiped out by unemployment and underemployment at the highest rate in the nation. Though lost wages, at least according to the experts, account for but one piece of a complex housing crisis. For Beatrice Cortinas and her husband Armando, it was the catalyst for a move from their 1,500 square foot home to a two-man tent in their backyard.
You start getting back pains, the lower back pains, and your hip starts hurting.
But the makeshift shelter for now is home, and this day, Beatrice fears even it is threatened.
Are they here?
No, not yet.
Despite a foreclosure challenge pending in the court, the bank has advised the Cortinas it is coming.
We have made every payment. Even with the bankruptcy, we have made every payment because we wanted to keep the house.
When I first started doing this, I would average maybe one a month of a foreclosure type of eviction, but now it's, well, all of the deputies here that have seen a big increase.
Big increase, try exponential.
This deputy constable.
Until recently, the Clark County Constable's Office averaged 300 foreclosure evictions a day.
I'm here for an immediate eviction.
Eviction?
Yes.
300 per day.
I win.
You were doing it now.
No, really.
Really, we are right now.
Now serving A701.
Recent changes to state law have slowed the flood of foreclosure filings.
Well, this will be a real easy eviction.
Cutting the constable's job, however, temporarily in half. Yet even with the decrease, Nevada maintains the highest foreclosure rate in the nation.
I'm so confused right now. I don't know.
Narda Navarro's among them.
Need to get a few things together, what you need, okay?
And go where? That's the problem. I don't know where to go. Honestly, I don't have nobody here. Honestly, I've been in this house 14 years.
Narda's disability plus her 5 four-footed friends prompt the deputies to assist beyond the call.
Right now, my partner and I are trying to call around and find out if someone did come and help. But all you do...
To help me with?
Move out. Yeah, I mean, I asked him about giving you an extra day or two, and he says no.
But I can't let all my dogs go.
Confusion, shock, and disbelief, say the deputies, punctuate a large percentage of lockouts.
You said you got your medicine?
Emotions preferred to anger, violence, or worse.
The worst I've had so far on 2 occasions where we knock on the door and the guy actually took his own life. He shot himself. You never get used to it, but unfortunately in this job, sooner or later it's going to happen. You know, it's just a matter of when.
In a desert underwater, no one is immune from loss. Since 2007, the number of foreclosed homes has topped the 6 figures, and the majority of those who remain owe more than their houses are worth. Pockets of neglect dot every zip code, including the Valley's most prestigious neighborhoods.
You drove down our street and it was weeds and dead grass.
Laura McSwain's Southern Highlands address cost her just shy of $2 million in 2005. Today, it's worth a quarter of that. Like most of her well-to-do neighbors, McSwain is hardly an unsophisticated home buyer. Yet she, too, is being forced to leave.
Anybody who lives here has been impacted. I don't care if you've lost your house or not. We've all been devastated.
Folks, just put their head on our desk and cry. They're without hope.
Former Speaker of the Nevada Assembly, Barbara Buckley, saw the carnage coming long before most did. Buckley runs a nonprofit legal aid center. When a tsunami of red ink engulfed the state starting in 2007, a human flood poured through the doors of her center. The tide has yet to turn.
The whole crisis has been overwhelming. I mean, we're first in the nation in notice of defaults, first in foreclosures, first in bankruptcies, first in unemployment. So yeah, it's just been a tsunami of people in need. And many of the people have never needed legal aid a day before in their life. They've never been without a job a day before in their life. They were, living the American dream.
It's the economic equivalent of an atomic explosion. The devastation ripped through the state, affecting everyone. According to Realty Track, since the burst of the housing bubble in 2007, nearly 130,000 Clark County homes have been foreclosed. Another 64,000 owners were forced out of their homes through short sales by lenders. Those who held on to their homes paid a price as well. Residential property values have dropped like a rock from a cliff, a 58% decrease in less than 4 years. In just the last 2 years, the value of residential property in Clark County plunged from $182 billion to a mere $98 billion. As of September, more than 60% of local homeowners, 257,000 families, were underwater. That is, they owe more than their homes are worth. The only community in the nation that is collectively in the red.
We're here to change the locks.
The emotional toll of losing one's home is not as easy to quantify. Shame and despair led Mr. and Mrs. Jeff Lingle out to the desert, where they took their own lives. According to their suicide note, they just couldn't do this anymore. In November, Jesse Saldivar, after losing his job and being served with a foreclosure notice, snapped. Hunkered inside the home, days away from eviction, he stabbed his girlfriend and their 3-year-old daughter, stuffed their bodies into his car, then killed himself. Every day in Las Vegas, dreams are crushed, lives extinguished.
We were counting the effect that this economy has had on people, and it's literally killing them. I mean, we counted 29 suicides that we know of.
29 suicides within a small circle of Tisha Black's law practice, that is. For years, Black's law firm specialized in commercial development. Like so many others, she rode the wave of a boom that saw Nevada lead the nation in growth, especially housing construction, for more than 20 straight years, with a 42% increase in housing units in the first decade of this century, more than triple the national average. But these days, Black spends most of her time helping clients who are facing foreclosure. Every single day, she listens to tales of abject despair.
It's devastating in a psychological sense when communities are disrupted because people have to move their children from a school, or because friends have to move because they can't find jobs here, because people are actually dying because of the loss in value and the loss in their estate. We are ground zero. There is virtually no one in this state that has not been affected by the foreclosure problem.
Entire neighborhoods have morphed into foreclosure ghettos. Evicted homeowners, angry at what they see as shabby treatment by their lenders, take out their frustrations by stealing fixtures and demolishing what's left. An estimated 6% of the homes in Clark County are vacant, along with 11% of apartments. Empty, shuttered homes are an open invitation to criminals, taggers, vagrants. The glut of vacant houses has been a bonanza for urban marijuana farmers. Police have seen a 5-fold increase in sophisticated grow houses, most of them operated by big-time criminal organizations. And the rancid icing on the cake comes from the banks. The mortgage holders, so quick and efficient in their foreclosures and evictions, often do little or nothing to maintain the properties once they're seized. Water and power are cut off, lawns and trees die. In some neighborhoods, it's an epidemic of neglect, even in upscale gated communities. Ripples from the foreclosure bomb are obvious everywhere, even on the Las Vegas Strip, previously thought to be recession-proof. On some of the most expensive real estate in the world, the rusting skeletons of canceled billion-dollar hotel projects stand as stark reminders. In 2010, bustling McCarran Airport saw a drop of 8 million passengers from just 3 years earlier. Gaming revenue dropped $2 billion. MGM, the largest employer in Nevada, lost $4 billion in real estate value alone. 60,000 construction jobs vanished. The unemployment rate in Nevada exceeded 15%, highest in the nation. Padlocked job sites are exhibits to a meltdown that saw a 170% increase in business bankruptcies between 2008 and 2010. Personal bankruptcies are off the chart, 25,000 last year alone. Not coincidentally, the number of homeless in our community has increased 40% in 3 years. The demand for government assistance, food aid, medical care, everything is beyond what anyone could have projected. But the tax revenues for state and local governments dropped by billions, which led to layoffs and cutbacks at precisely the time when government services are needed most, the very definition of a vicious cycle. It's bad, but it isn't close to being over.
It has affected so many people, but the experts project that we're only halfway through. And that's just mind-boggling to me. They had 100,000 people have faced foreclosure, and now we're likely to see 100,000 more. It's just impossible to imagine that we're only halfway through.
Coming up, the financial mumbo-jumbo used to pull off the biggest crime of all time.
Certainly the wealth destruction is in the trillions of dollars.
I happen to know the bank turned down this loan, but he comes here and we're building him a house worth $5,000. Why?
Well, I handled that, Mr. Potter. You have all the papers there, his salary, insurance. I can personally vouch for his character.
Friend of yours?
Yes, sir.
Ask what the public thinks of bankers, and the image is probably closer to Henry Potter than to George Bailey. It's hard to imagine an industry that is more widely despised.
It's been 3 years since the financial crisis crippled the American economy. There's not been a single prosecution of a high-ranking Wall Street executive or major financial firm.
Hard-hitting TV exposés and independent documentaries have helped to focus the public's wrath on the bankers, whose greed and recklessness ignited a national economic implosion, buried Las Vegas, and is still destroying lives. When the public thinks of Wall Street, these are the words that come to mind.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
The cinematic regression from George Bailey
Merry Christmas!
to Gordon Gekko is hardly mysterious.
I took you in. A nobody!
The modern history of Wall Street is largely a string of increasingly costly scandals. The savings and loan debacle of the 80s, Enron and Tyco in the 90s, the internet bubble, And now the biggest of them all, the housing collapse. In each scandal, the damage got bigger, as did the bonuses and CEO salaries. On Wall Street, nothing exceeds like excess.
Because you did very well when the company was doing well, and you did very well when the company wasn't doing well.
It made many of us furious, and I think that that's a very natural feeling considering the effect that this financial cataclysm has had on everybody.
Las Vegas philanthropist Heather Murrin made a fortune as an analyst on Wall Street before leaving in 2002. More recently, she spent 18 months as one of the 10 members of the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, appointed to investigate the causes of the meltdown. The final report of the commission estimates the total loss of household wealth at $11 trillion, the biggest crime of all time.
Certainly the wealth destruction is in the trillions of dollars. So yes, I think that would certainly qualify as being the biggest crime of all.
One key factor in the meltdown was the erosion of oversight. Every president since Ronald Reagan has pushed for fewer controls on Wall Street. Let the market run free. When the protections that separated commercial banks from investment banks were removed, the stage was set for disaster. When the government encouraged homeownership through subprime loans, Wall Street saw an opportunity and ran with it. Mortgages were packaged together and sold as AAA-rated securities, as if the housing market could never fail. Homeowners were happy. Lenders made mountains of money. Regulators looked the other way.
Failure and gaps in our regulatory system, a failure of corporate accountability and ethics, a lack of transparency in the system. Not only did investors not understand what they were investing in, but perhaps mortgage people that were getting mortgages didn't understand the mortgage they were entering into. An awful lot of desire to consume. You know, everybody took on more debt because they needed to buy the latest thing and have a bigger house.
It was a perfect fit for Las Vegas with its long-standing addiction to growth. Nowhere did the housing bubble grow bigger. Home prices exploded. Investors and flippers poured in. Lenders didn't care if you repaid the loan.
They would help you get a loan, and then they would sell it to someone who sold it to somebody else, who sold it to somebody else. So they didn't feel much accountability if they lent to someone who couldn't pay, because they weren't holding it. And they made more money if they sold you an exotic loan.
Exotic loans with sliding interest rates and balloon payments were given to buyers with sketchy credit and recorded on documents that were bogus, then sold as securities by Wall Street. It's no wonder we call them banksters.
Bankster was actually coined in the 1930s in the Depression era. That is a revived term that has come back, banksters.
And it fit then and it fits now?
And it fits now.
The problem was created because they were authorized 20 plus years ago to engage in wholesale gambling, playing the markets, the securities markets.
Attorneys Matt Collister and Tisha Black are both angry, not only because the bankers caused the crisis in the first place, but because of what they see as a pattern of criminal behavior since.
The stories that we hear about what the banks have done suggest strongly somebody should go to jail.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of these guys should go to jail.
Absolutely. I'm infuriated that none of them are in jail yet. I mean, it is unbelievable that when you have people forging documentation to foreclose on people's houses and record that in the public record, that is a crime, period. That is a crime.
One of the reasons this complex system survived for as long as it did is because so few people understand it. Before the late 1990s, buying a home looked something like this. Take our fictional homeowner, Bob. He finds a house, then borrows the money to pay for it from his local bank. Here's Bob's house. During the transaction, Bob receives a deed of trust to secure the mortgage and a note, his promise to pay it back. The deed of trust is a public record recorded with the county. The deed of trust and the original note are then locked for safekeeping in a vault at the bank. For the life of the loan, Bob makes his payments to the same bank. Should Bob find himself in financial trouble, any relief would come from there as well. Not anymore. Beginning in the late 1990s, the relationship between homeowners and lenders fundamentally changed. with the advent of mortgage-backed securities. Instead of a local bank servicing a home loan for, say, a 30-year term, lenders sold those loans to Wall Street, which then packaged them and resold them to investors. It looks something like this. Bob the homeowner buys a house and again borrows the money to pay for it. But instead of his local bank, this time Bob gets a mortgage from a corporate lender, say Bank of America. Again, the corporate lender has the note, and the deed of trust is recorded with the county. But the similarities end there. In this example, the corporate lender, also known as the originator, sells Bob's loan on Wall Street. This coin represents Bob's loan. An entity known as a sponsor buys Bob's loan. The sponsor takes Bob's loan and pools it with thousands of others from all over the country. The sponsor sells the bundled loans to another corporate entity known as the depositor. The depositor works with a credit rating agency to get a letter grade for the bundle. A AAA rating tells investors the securities are a low risk. The depositor then transfers the rated loan pool into a trust. The trust sells certificates to individuals, companies, and large investment groups. That trust certificate is the mortgage-backed security. All along the way, each of these entities gets a cut. Everybody's making money. But perhaps more importantly, the lender has shifted the risk that maybe Bob doesn't pay off his loan and dumped it squarely on the investors. Bob is likely unaware that any of this has taken place. He pays his mortgage every month to a B of A servicer. Plus, if he looks his house up at the county recorder's office, it reflects that B of A holds his mortgage. However, again in the late 1990s, to circumvent the traditional recording process, mortgage bankers created the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, or MERS. It allows members to sell mortgages again and again without recording the transactions with the county. That saves them both time and money. Despite its complexity, all of this worked, up until the point that Bob defaults on his loan. To foreclose on Bob's house, a second servicer, known as the default servicer, steps in. The default servicer has to document all of these transactions to take Bob's house. When it realizes it can't, because in many cases no one kept track of the paperwork, the default servicer then begins to recreate the legally required paper trail, often through an illegal process known as robo-signing.
Going once? 59,800 from Chris?
60.
It's hard to imagine a more unceremonious disposal of what is for most people their most important possession. But each day, sandwiched between parking stripes, auctioneers peddle the foreclosed dreams of hundreds of Valley homeowners.
Going once? Going twice?
Though most of the investors here know each other by name, the deals are nothing personal. To everyone, that is, except Joe Zito.
They're vultures, as far as I'm concerned. They're circling, waiting for the prey to die, and then they come in.
Zito waits for hours at a time to contest the sale of his home, insisting to the I-Team's Nathan Baca that irregularities in his foreclosure paperwork raise suspicion about their legitimacy.
I want to resolve one way or the other, and if I'm the owner, I'm the owner. If they can prove they're the owner, more power to them.
Select beneficiary when any...
You never know.
Tanya Butterfield, too, is fighting foreclosure.
I didn't realize this was going to be that emotional. So,
with the help of an attorney like Zito, Butterfield discovered inconsistencies in the documents used to take her home.
It's, something that we see all the time.
Tara Newberry represents the Butterfields.
You look at the document and they sign as an officer of MERS, and then the next recording down, it's the same person signing as the vice president of Bank ABC. And it's like, wait a minute.
On the same day in records filed to foreclose on the Butterfields, the name Angela Nava appears wearing two hats. On one document, she's the Assistant Secretary of MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Registration System. On another, she's the assistant secretary for U.S. Bank.
And the question becomes, you know, who is Angela Nava? Did she have the authority to make this assignment? And on whose behalf was she really acting?
Newberry suspects Nava is a robo-signer, a mortgage servicing employee who signs off on thousands of foreclosures without actually reviewing them.
She's in the same predicament as I am.
Like the Butterfields, Art Einhorn found the Nava name in his foreclosure records, except here, instead of U.S. Bank, Nava is the assistant secretary of Deutsche Bank. In case after case, the I-team discovered Nava's signatures for Bank of America and for Bank of New York.
What do you think's going on here?
Troy Fox is Einhorn's attorney.
I think Angela Nava works for some company where all she does all day is sign her name.
Attorneys general in all 50 states deem robo-signing a crime. And Nevada's AG recently announced a 600-count indictment in a scheme suspected of producing tens of thousands of fraudulent documents.
This is the tip of the iceberg.
Chief Deputy Attorney General John Kelleher is prosecuting the case.
The scope and the size of the fraud we're talking about is I find it hard to even put it in a context, because we've never seen anything this global, this industry-wide.
But in the civil arena, robo-signing and its impact remains largely undefined. Einhorn's case, presently before the state Supreme Court, may set the precedent here in Nevada.
We don't know what is going to happen next. We don't know if years down the road you may have to defend a claim about whether or not you own your own home.
After 30-plus years in the banking industry, Bill Campbell discovered in retirement that he may not own his home. Even though he never missed a payment, an illegal foreclosure before he bought it calls his rights into question. Tisha Black told him 9 out of every 10 homes that were once in foreclosure have a problem with the title.
I'm not going to make the kind of money that it's going to take to qualify to buy another house. Where am I going to go? I'm a renter for the rest of my life because of decisions that somebody else made.
And it got to the point we had to either choose to eat or make the house payment.
Karen Barrett and her husband put everything they had into a small fixer-upper. It's always been more than just a house. It's a memory box, the last place Karen's father visited before he died of cancer, the first place her granddaughter visited after being born. When the economy crashed, their income dropped. U.S. Bank told them if they wanted a modified mortgage, they first had to default by stopping their payments. Months later, they were notified of their new mortgage.
So it gets sent here, gets sent there, and basically it came back. They would lower our house payment $7.
How long did it take you to get a $7 reduction in your house payment?
It took a couple of months, yeah.
$7.
$7 whole.
The Barretts had no choice but to allow the bank to sell the house. Because they hoped to get a few bucks from the sale, they continued to fix and maintain the place. Weeks before it was to be turned over, Karen got an alert from her alarm company there'd been a break-in. When she raced home, she saw the front door had been smashed in, the alarm ripped out, and 5 guys were inside.
And I said, "Who are you? What are you doing in my home?" And they wouldn't answer me. I said, "What are you doing in my home?" "We have the right to be here." I'm like, "No, you don't have the right to be here. This is my home."
After police arrived, the men finally admitted they worked for a subcontractor, Five Brothers Construction, which had been hired by the bank, though the Barretts still owned the house.
Very scary to think we're in the United States and this can happen to you.
I know they're destroying lives.
Brad Myers had good credit and a good job when he bought his dream home in Laughlin. But when it came time to sign the final papers, the payment listed was much higher than what he'd agreed to pay. No problem, he was told.
They said that they would correct it. Let's just get in the house and take care of it. So I did sign the loan documents.
He immediately began negotiating with Bank of America for a modification. Months of delays followed, but he finally was approved in writing for a payment he could afford. For the next 18 months, he made the payments. Then the bank changed its mind.
And all of a sudden I get a letter in the mail, my mortgage payment was returned, and now they're telling me that I owe the full payment. They decided they're not going to honor it, and basically the gist is that I'm going into foreclosure.
How do I counsel clients?
Attorney Matt Collister says Myers was victimized twice, once by the mortgage agent who pulled a bait and switch, and then by B of A, which had no intention of letting him keep the house.
Why is it that banks are being allowed to do this? To run rampant over the American who's trying. That's the tragedy. These are people who are trying. They're not trying to make out They're not trying to get something for nothing. They're trying to just pay that mortgage and keep their home.
Businesswoman Laura McSwain and her husband ran a construction company with 400 employees at one time. When the housing business collapsed, they tried to refinance their home. After months of wrangling, their bank, Wells Fargo, obtained a highly questionable appraisal that killed their chances of refinancing.
All I can tell you is based on the little information that I have, again, because we have not been able to do discovery, is that the name of the company that is posted at the top of the appraisal that Wells obtained was from a company whose owner surrendered his license within 30 days of having done our appraisal. They've destroyed our personal credit, they've destroyed our financial well-being, but they've done it across the state, they've done it across the country.
You name it, lenders have pulled it, says Tisha Black.
Fraudulent practices relating to origination, fraudulent practices relating to foreclosure, forging documents, manufacturing documents, false information meant to induce people into a modification. It's endless.
Across the country, banks and service providers have encouraged homeowners to go into default. It's bad advice. They lose the paperwork, drag it out for months or longer. A Bank of America whistleblower submitted a statement in an Arizona court case alleging it's done on purpose, that dragging it out keeps the debt off the bank's books. Matt Collister says lenders have a built-in incentive to foreclose. In the end, they get the house plus reimbursement from the government.
The reason that the banks want to foreclose, as opposed to work with you and me on modifying our loans, is because that loan is federally guaranteed.
They have every incentive to foreclose.
They have only an incentive to foreclose.
Coming up, the national effort to let bankers off the hook as Nevadans dig in their heels and fight back.
And they're stealing your futures like they stole my grandparents' futures and my parents' futures and our futures.
One is, don't try and stop the foreclosure process. Let it run its course and hit the bottom.
When presidential candidate Mitt Romney told hard-hit Nevadans they should hold on and wait for the free market to fix the foreclosure mess, he was expressing a philosophy almost akin to religion, the widely held belief that a market free of government interference will regulate itself. When it comes to Wall Street, though,
it's a philosophy that doesn't work when the rubber meets the road.
Heather Murrin and others on the commission which investigated the economic meltdown questioned, among others, the chief proponent of the free market philosophy, Alan Greenspan, who served as chairman of the Federal Reserve under 5 presidents. The Fed could have stopped the trouble long before it became a crisis. It was warned by the FBI in 2004, but took a hands-off approach instead, as did the SEC. They let the banks be banks.
There was a great belief for many, many years that the free market system ultimately can fix itself and that the banks have their own self-interest at heart and they can regulate themselves. But the fact is that that didn't work in the longer term. The SEC was largely absent from all of this. I would say that they failed in their duties to accurately understand the instruments that were being produced and sold by Wall Street and looked the other way too frequently and were too close to the industry that they governed.
In Nevada, the consequences of an unregulated Wall Street can be seen everywhere. The suggestion that government should do nothing to interrupt the wave of foreclosures still to come caused some leaders to bristle.
There are people in this country that think and have stated that they think that we need to hit rock bottom. How much further down do they want us to go?
I'm taking a different approach.
Even Republican Governor Brian Sandoval says he doesn't buy that government should do nothing. Wall Street's enormous influence with regulators and policymakers was never more obvious than in the bailout fiasco. Major banks were on the brink. Washington rode to the rescue with the TARP program, hundreds of billions for the banks. But many congressmen who voted for the bailouts did so in the belief that the bulk of those billions would go to homeowners in trouble, not just to banks. In the end, the language was watered down. Banks got the money, but were required only to try and help homeowners. We know how that worked out.
These big banks control so much that our bailing them out stopped, as I repeat, a situation from getting worse, but they have not let any of that money trickle down. They've kept it all.
The banks are now bigger, more concentrated, more powerful than ever. Wall Street employs 5 times as many lobbyists as there are members of Congress. When the presidents of the big banks told Congress they'd stop foreclosures if homeowners requested a modification, they were lying, says Matt Collister.
That promise was a promise that's been broken. I hear it every single day.
Collister says there's only one way to get banks to help homeowners with a modified mortgage, and that is to force them.
I have not seen anybody who got a reduction, modification of their loan so they could stay in their house, which is all it really accomplishes, without the benefit of having to litigate, and that's tragic.
The recently departed Inspector General of the TARP program said much the same thing. The program has been great for banks, but an absolute failure for homeowners. Pressure is building again in Washington for less oversight, to again let banks be banks.
A former chairman of Morgan Stanley, I thought, said something wonderful, which you hardly ever see, and he said, you know, somebody needs to help us control ourselves. Not a lot of CEOs would make that statement.
Right there.
To help struggling homeowners, the Obama administration created an alphabet soup of assistance programs. Acronyms like HAMP, HARP, and HAFA all fall under the umbrella of a $75 billion foreclosure prevention initiative known as Making Home Affordable.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen.
The public service announcement promoting the programs, more than a dozen of them, urges homeowners to stop being frozen by fear and to instead take action to save their homes. But according to the government's own auditors, the vast majority of those who heeded that advice got stiffed, particularly with respect to HAMP, the flagship program for mortgage modifications. Despite its goal to assist up to 4 million American homeowners, only some 800,000 have secured permanent relief. And of those, fewer than 15,000 hail from the country's foreclosure capital, right here in southern Nevada.
I've got maybe 200-300 that I've got all the way through the process of probably 2,000-3,000 I've filed.
Attorney Matt Collister shows off a sparsely populated victory room to the I-Team's George Knapp. Collister has represented thousands of clients with mixed results against the likes of IndyMac, GMAC, and his arch nemesis, Bank of America.
They've just decided, I mean, as far as you can tell, to dig in their heels.
They're not going to play. They're going to wait us out.
Participation in programs like HAMP is largely voluntary for mortgage lenders. The plan's architects assume that hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars in the form of the bailout would be incentive enough for the nation's biggest banks to help homeowners. Yet 2 years later, the administration acknowledges it has yet to make home affordable. Collister suggests it never will, unless the legislation gets some teeth.
They were saved, literally, by the taxpayer. You'd think that the program, the sole lifeline that's been extended to people, would be compulsory, and that there would be people going to jail for not complying with the law. This is law.
Yet even supposedly state-specific solutions remain a suggestion for servicers.
Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody, have a seat.
In February of 2010, Valley homeowners gave President Obama a standing ovation for his pledge of $1.5 billion to the states hardest hit by the housing crisis.
And that means here in Nevada.
Nevada's cut $194 million to help low to middle-income households preserve their American dream. But nearly 2 years after the president's announcement, a fraction of eligible Nevadans have received assistance. As of September, less than $2 million has been spent on fewer than 450 families.
It's totally underwhelming.
Few are more frustrated with the failure than Lon DeWeese and Charles Horsey, the state housing officials who oversee the hardest hit fund. Instead of tailor-made solutions for Nevada families, the fund, they explain, is largely controlled by Washington mandates, including a provision that exempts loans held by government-sponsored lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
We thought that it was going to be just the savior that Nevada needed. Nobody that's facing eviction from their home or foreclosure wants to hear, well, your loan is Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac and therefore you're not eligible. They're desperate. And that's what has been the most disappointing.
Further complicating relief efforts, a requirement that lenders not only participate, but also contribute matching dollars.
We have a total of about 17 banks that have signed up specifically for a principal reduction program. But at this point in time, there's only 3 of them that actually have sent a file our way for processing.
To get the program working, during an exclusive interview with the I-Team, Governor Brian Sandoval announced an ambitious new agenda for the fund.
And I think there's plenty of blame to go around everywhere. I'm trying to reach solutions.
Fixes facilitated in part by the governor's personal lobbying efforts of both the U.S. Department of Treasury and the nation's biggest banks.
We reached out to the banks and I said, what can we do for Nevada? What can you do as a group? I've been impressed. I've been, with regard to their acceptance, with regard to their attendance, and with regard to their listening and trying to help find solutions.
And they're stealing your futures like they stole my grandparents' futures.
Make your house payment. It wouldn't be here.
What happens when the banks could not make their payments? They got a handout, right?
They bring more money.
They got bailed out.
For the Occupy movement to rattle a weekly auction of foreclosed homes is a reminder that the public is still ticked off, especially at those who are cashing in on the misery of so many. It's no accident the movement started on Wall Street because that's where the meltdown began. The Occupy protests spread to dozens of cities, including Las Vegas, because of the general belief that the deck has been stacked, the system rigged to favor big money interests.
There's nothing approaching a fair playing field. The stories I have heard are so stomach-churning that I have become immune to them.
Individual clients like Brad Myers can't afford to do it on their own, so they band together and split the costs. Whether he wins or loses mostly boils down to which of Nevada's federal judges hears the case. A few simply do not rule against the banks.
That's what the people in the streets are saying. Stop this now, right now. If you can reach out and save the banks, as we did with TARP, why aren't we doing something just that dramatic to save middle-class America?
And welcome back, KDWN News Time, 9:34.
Attorney Tisha Black has taken to the airwaves to encourage people to fight
in the worst
back.
case, if you are stuck with all those loans, there may be a way that you could work to try to negotiate them down.
Her weekly call-in show offers practical advice to homeowners in a jam, but is also a call to arms. Someone needs to pay, she says, and not just in fines.
It's reprehensible, and it's not ending. I mean, what we have, too big to fail, but I've also heard, I've heard it stated as too big to jail.
Can anger alone produce results?
But the Stephen Baum firm lost key business.
Consider the case of a New York foreclosure mill, the Baum Law Firm. For their company Halloween party, employees dressed like homeless winos, mocking the thousands of homeowners they'd evicted on behalf of their bank clients. Public outrage exploded when the photos were published in the New York Times. Within weeks, the foreclosure mill was shut down forever.
The public rage is starting to swell, and that I think politicians and people that are in charge of policy and policing are starting to feel the pressure that they should have felt a long time ago.
We don't want foreclosures.
The banks have tried to put a smiley face spin on the big picture, but in court after court, they're being ordered to pay huge fines in lawsuits filed by other banks and investors. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and others are already on the hook for billions, with more suits to come. A federal judge ordered Citigroup to pay $285 million, but refused to go along with the SEC's recommendation that the bank should not have to admit it did anything wrong. Barbara Buckley proved that the massive power of the banking lobby can be beaten.
Motions, resolutions.
The reforms she pushed at the Nevada legislature were passed over the furious objections of bank lobbyists. The Las Vegas City Council likewise ignored the wailing of the bankers when it passed an ordinance requiring something that should be a given, that banks must maintain the homes that have been foreclosed. In Washington, though, Wall Street calls the shots. It owns Congress, admits Senator Dick Durbin.
You can blame the Democrats as well as Republicans for eras now of deregulation of lending institutions. The problem is, as one of my colleagues who just returned from D.C. pointed out, across the street from the White House is a Bank of America office. Now, you could question who's really driving the boat here.
Please welcome Beau Biden. Beau.
A new breed of pseudo-celebrity has emerged from the foreclosure crisis.
How are you?
I'm great.
Elected officials like Delaware Attorney General Beau Biden celebrated not for his mainstream political views, but for what many consider to be an anti-establishment stance on the housing bust.
We've been clamoring here for the longest time for someone to sue the banks on Wall Street, and apparently you are that man who is going to quench our thirst for vengeance.
Biden, along with New York AG Eric Snyderman and Nevada's own Catherine Cortez Masto, stand among a handful of state regulators refusing to stop their pursuit of the big banks.
Today, it is my pleasure to kick off this California and Nevada Mortgage Investigation Alliance.
Before a throng of cameras in Los Angeles, Masto announced a partnership with California AG Kamala Harris to investigate all manner of mortgage wrongdoing. An alliance forged in spite of ongoing settlement talks between a majority coalition of their counterparts and the nation's largest lenders. Known simply as the multi-state, it would release banks from liability for a wide range of foreclosure misconduct in exchange for an estimated $20 billion. Though Masto stopped short of rejecting it altogether, she says she will not endorse a free pass for fraud.
From my perspective, don't come into my state and take advantage of these folks and think that you're going to be able to walk away from it.
In addition to civil lawsuits against Bank of America and more recently Lender Processing Services, or LPS, Masto filed the first criminal indictments in the country for robo-signing.
State of Nevada versus Geraldine Ann Shepard.
LPS title officers Gary Trafford and Jerry Shepard face 600 counts for allegedly directing employees to forge signatures and to falsely notarize foreclosure documents.
The amount of counts in our indictment literally was an arbitrary cutoff. We could easily have done 1,000. We could have done 10,000. It got to a point where, from a case presentation standpoint, it was bordering on the ridiculous.
Among John Kelleher's key witnesses, former LPS notaries like Jennifer. She told the grand jury that between 2003 and 2005, she forged at Shepard's request an average of 100 records a week, often using 2 different pens to conceal the fraud.
They were in California, and these things have to be signed by the title officer and notarized. And so it was just part of the job was sign her name and notarize it, and that was it. And you just did it.
For her role in the alleged scheme, Jennifer is expected to admit to a single gross misdemeanor, a deal cut in recognition of her value as a whistleblower.
It's not okay for our banking, real estate, and mortgage business to be a spider web where every time you enter into it, you're waiting for the spider to pounce. That's not okay. And we're seeing the result of that type of business approach going on for too long.
Now serving.
To combat robo-signing, earlier this year, state lawmakers passed Assembly Bill 284. Among its provisions, the new law requires those foreclosing on a home to submit a sworn affidavit proving they have the right to bring the action. It also increases civil and criminal penalties for those who file fraudulent foreclosure documents.
What the lenders and the beneficiaries were most afraid of, from the couple representatives I spoke to, is they had to sign it under penalty of perjury. And the Attorney General in the model form wrote, criminal prosecution may result if you are lying, more or less. And that scared the bejesuses out of them.
So much so that in the first month the law took effect, foreclosure filings in Clark County alone dropped a whopping 80%. Presumably, says Tisha Black, as lenders reassess their practices.
What that tells me is that when the banks are held accountable, they'll start doing things improperly. If there is a punishment related to their misactivities, such as crime, right, that we'll start getting them to do things. They will start producing documents and conducting foreclosures in a proper manner.
Requests for interviews were made to all 5 of the biggest banks in Nevada repeatedly. They were repeatedly declined. Coming up, the 800-pound political gorilla.
Without political reform, a lot of these things we cannot fix.
The FBI saw trouble coming. So did a few of the states. So did auditors working within the Wall Street banks. But their warnings were ignored by bank regulators and the banks themselves. It wasn't an accident.
Wall Street is the single largest source of federal campaign dollars, and it employs more lobbyists than any other industry. Essentially, there are no limits to what it can spend to influence our government.
If we want to make sure this kind of problem doesn't happen again, we have to eventually look at the larger issue, money in politics.
the system itself began to erode. And at the same time, and perhaps coincidentally, but doubtfully, the system and the regulatory regime was eroding as the financial services sector from, let's say, the years 1999 through the year 2006 gave about $2.7 billion to lobbyists to lobby for their cause. And in addition to that, over $1 billion in political contributions. So to me, there is some disconnect between the ability that they have to influence the policies that govern them.
The U.S. Supreme Court decision came out, with an opinion that basically said private corporations can invest as much as they want in political campaigns. So then that begets more TV advertising, more slogans, less solutions, more partisanship.
What's stunning is how much money is spent lobbying. I mean, just looking at the financial services sector, billions of dollars, it just makes me wonder what value added there is for that activity, because certainly it cannot be about educating our elected officials, because one would think you could educate them for a lot less money than that on the subject that they would be passing laws about. So I do think that there needs to be some way to rethink how it is that we elect our officials, make money not as important.
Isn't democracy dead already if you look at it as unlimited money
I
that
don't
goes
want to
in?
believe that yet. I hear that argument. I hear it across this table every single day. But I want to believe. I think most Americans want to believe that when there is a crisis of this enormity, that at some point, finally, its government will stand up and do the right thing.
The only way that it can be a threat to basic democracy is if all of us sit back and don't do anything and don't raise our hands.
I've been thinking about setting my house on fire.